back to the Code for Couples podcast. Today, I am super excited to have Jason and Today, I'm super excited to have Jason and Katie Hoschouer.
There you go. Nailed it.
Hoschouer
Got
on the podcast. And I guess I'm not the only one that screws up their last name, so I don't feel too bad about that. So the story is that I came across Jason's book when I was researching guests, and I signed up for his newsletter and then started stalking him on Facebook and just kind of seeing his stuff. And I called Jason. Jason and I made contact about being guests on the podcast. And after hearing his story or their story, I decided I wanted both of them on the podcast because, as you know, I think it's always empowering to hear the stories that other couples go through as law enforcement couples. And so everything's not rainbows and sunshine, and sometimes the struggle is real. And so I wanted to bring them on. So let me just give you a teaser here, though. Their story ends in them paying off $77,000 in debt in 28 months. And so if that perked your ears up, keep listening. Let me tell you a little bit about both of them first. They met in 2002 and married in January 2005. They have 3 incredible, cute little daughters in their life. And they are just like, if you follow them on social media, they have super cute pictures. Jason's been a police officer for over 20 years. 13 of those were as a motorcycle officer, which is the only one who's given me a ticket in the last 20 years, by the way.
Solid.
More specifically, he's the motor cop, or simply MC, and he started a blog in 2008 just as a way of like therapy, almost like just this cathartic process of putting things out there. And from there, he grew a platform that not only educates but entertains people at the same time. He's written articles for American Cop Magazine, Police One, and he is a podcaster as well. His recent podcast is What's Your Emergency, which he co-hosts with Jason Shore, who is also called the Happy Medic. So that's Jason, but he's not the only one that's amazing in this couple. Katie is also amazing. She's a certified professional organizer and the owner of Katie Can Help. She spent 5 years working towards this and helps numerous families in the San Francisco Bay Area manage their mess. So if you are in the area and need help, call Katie. But the cool story, and I'm not going to give this away, the cool story to me is also how her business came out of a desire to go on a trip, a business trip, quote unquote. So I'll let them that be a part of the story as well. But they are just an amazing couple. And so welcome, Jason and Katie. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Man, I feel like she's really built this up.
Yeah. No pressure at all.
I think we're in big trouble.
Yeah.
And just a point of order, I would like to return to the 3 cute daughter aspect of this. It really depends on the day.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yesterday we had 2.5 cute kids. So.
So Jason, you and I started having a conversation about possibly podcasting about your book. And then as we went along, I really got inspired by your story, which is also in the book, but just the way you told the story was just amazing. And I think where I want to start is you sharing about how you got stuck in that overtime cycle and what was the impact.
Well, it really started for us back in 2009, and I won't spoil the big point that Katie made. I'll let her tell that part of it. But to give you some context, our perception and perspective on money wasn't how much is this? Can we afford it? It was how much this cost a month? How much overtime do I have to work to afford this thing? And our big shining example of that was we went to go, and I know this is a podcast. I do the same thing on my show, and I'm going to use air quotes on a radio show. We went to go look at travel trailers. And she was, God, like 6 months pregnant
Something like
with our first kid. This is 2006. And we're sitting in this really cool hybrid travel trailer. And the question out of her mouth was, how much is this going to cost us every month? And how much overtime do you have to work so we can afford this? We ended up buying the stupid thing. And it was fun. We loved it. We miss it, but I don't miss the payment. And it was $200 a month, which is nothing.
Yeah,
It's not that. Yeah. Well, here in the Bay Area, we're spoiled. I get paid very, very well to do the stupid things that I do at work. And that was probably equivalent of like one court overtime, 3 hours done. There you go. We can do it. So we thought, okay, we can do this. Long story short, we ended up selling that thing about 3 or 4 years later, sold it, and then used the profit to pay off her student loans. So it was huge. It was absolutely huge. And we have stopped asking, how much is this a month? What we ask now is, can we afford to just buy it? And if the answer is no, fine, we'll save for it. And the interesting part of that is, you will find if you're saving for a large item, many $1,000s worth of stuff, if a few months into your saving, you may think, you know what, I don't really need and or want that thing anymore. But now I got $3,000 in the bank that I can do whatever with.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of a shift in that mindset from that sparkly, I call them like the sparkly objects.
Yep.
And I know that in our field of law enforcement, it's pretty common to be like, ooh, sparkly object, let's go get it. I need that hit. And some of that comes from the conditioning in the brain. And like, I could go through that, the neuropsychology part, but we'll skip it today. But it's like this hit in the brain. Like, I spent money. Woo, that felt good.
Yeah.
So,
Exactly.
I love the justification of like, 3 hours of overtime, whatever, that's nothing.
Yeah.
So that's how it started.
What's interesting is that because of what he experiences at work, we kind of reasoned it that, well, now we can go on vacation, so you can actually decompress with this fun, sparkly object. But really, he was having to work overtime, so we couldn't use it as much as we would have wanted to anyway. It was a double-edged sword, definitely.
In Gil Martin's book, Emotional Survival for Law Enforcement, he talks about the financial aspect of the pressures that we go through. And it really is, you get the same kind of a high when you spend money as you do an adrenaline dump at work. And we go through this, he calls it the hypervigilance roller coaster, right? Because we operate way above most people's every day, right? I can't walk into Starbucks without looking at everybody's hands and where the escape routes and absolutely. And it's exhausting. So when I get home and I crash, and it's just like I'm way beneath where everybody else operates, and I think I need to be there for my family. I need to get back up. What can I do to energize myself? And spending money? Woo! Egads, please. It makes me feel great. But here's the problem. Now I've spent, and this is a definite difference between Y chromosomes and non-Y chromosomes. The female officers will buy a pair of shoes or whatever, like $300-400. Male officers will go spend $80,000 on a friggin' pickup truck. Right?
Or jet ski.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So now, because sweetie, you deserve it. You've been working so hard.
Yes.
But now you've spent all that money, so you have to go back to work and work more overtime, and the cycle starts. That's what I call the overtime cycle. And that's how it all starts. That's how you find yourself hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, because you're justifying your spending because, I worked so hard, I deserve it. Drives me nuts.
And I love the fact that you're bringing that, I deserve it kind of up in the fact that as spouses, sometimes we can, and kind of what you said, Katie, like, this will be great. We can relax, right? As spouses, I think sometimes we enable that behavior. So it's like, you do deserve it. You've earned this, and we'll use it to go have fun. But then it's like, but now I've also added on more time that I can't come down from that cycle, and that impacts my wellness and my sleep and, all kinds of other physiological components, not just, and mental,
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
psychological components.
And like he said, I was pregnant with our first child. I had no idea when we sat in that travel trailer and said, well, we'd be comfortable. I remember that conversation.
Yeah.
We'd be comfortable spending $200 a month. Can you get this where it's $200 a month? So we signed a 15-year lease agreement on this thing. It was like, what?
For an $18,000 trailer, we signed a 15-year.
A 15-year thing.
Dumb.
And I had no idea how many hours of overtime would it be, how that would impact our growing family. Because I wasn't a mom yet. I mean, I was growing to be a mom, but I didn't think of it in terms of how many hours is that away from our family. It was, how can I get this shiny toy? How long do you need to be away? But it did not register as my kid isn't going to have a dad for a while for those same hours. And only in hindsight did I notice that, and it continued for a number of years, adding all of our kids, because we started in that overtime cycle. And when we decided to not be in that cycle anymore, he had to be away even more. By then we had 2 babies, and added a third at the same time. And it was intense. It was really intense.
So at what point did you realize that it was having an impact on you, Katie, or the relationship, or Jason? At what point in time did you realize that this pattern wasn't going to work anymore?
Honestly, I remember a car ride, and we would talk about, how much should I spend at Costco? How much can I spend? And
that was always the question. How much can I spend on groceries this month?
He'd say, how much do you need? I'm like, I could spend $500 easy at Costco.
I need all of the money.
Yeah, like
Costco,
right? And we had the one baby at the time. I'm like, oh, well, she's going to start needing more. So yeah, I can spend all the monies at Costco and Target and what have you. And I remember this one conversation in the car, and I just said, why are we doing it like that? We have a certain amount of money. So why is it that I can't spend the same amount of money, be more disciplined with it? Let's say I get $200 to go to Costco. I can't go above $200. And he's like, I don't know. It's kind of working how we're doing it. Like, we weren't having problems, right? We weren't, It wasn't this elephant in the room. It was, we could be doing something better. And it just didn't feel like this big, huge realization. It was just, you know what? We can do something better. We now have this family. We can do something better. And it wasn't when I asked that question of, how about I just get $200 for groceries? Or it was actually $400, but $200 per paycheck. And I wouldn't go above that. He's like, I don't really know if that's going to work for us. And that's where I came across Dave Ramsey. And I was like, well, this guy says, and he's like, oh, well, it must be legit. Let's totally do that.
So you needed like this backup reference.
Oh, totally.
She loves telling that story. If she has a good idea, and I'm like, I don't know, and she comes up with a third party who has the same idea, suddenly it's like the greatest idea ever. My recollection of it isn't a car ride. It was in our living room, and I just happened to be walking through, and she said, she made a statement and then asked me a question. And the statement was, well, she said, can we sit down and talk for a few minutes? Okay, fine. I had a moment of clarity or something and decided to, sure, I'll sit down. So I sit down, and she said, I'm worried about our finances. And I could have thrown up the barrier and been like, I make plenty of money. We make good money, right? Yeah. I mean, with all the overtime I was working, we were making a decent living. I mean, we live in the Bay Area. You have to think of it in ratios. You know, when I hear Dave's show and people like, I paid off the house, and like, oh my God, that's amazing. Yeah, $125,000. I'm like, oh, that's adorable. You do not live in the San Francisco Bay Area. I mean, between our first and second mortgage, we're paying $3,000 a month. I mean, in some states, that's a cop's entire monthly salary.
Right.
And gas is different, and groceries are different, all that. So oftentimes I will get that if I talk about how much we paid off and the amount of time we did it in. Well, if I was making $100,000 a year, I'd be, debt free too. Would you?
Mhm.
Would you though? It, like you said, it's all a mindset.
Mhm.
So I
Mhm.
decided to listen, and I said, okay, well, talk to me. Why are you worried about our finances? And she did. And then she asked me the question, and that was how she got to Dave Ramsey. She said, have you ever heard of Dave Ramsey? And I swear to you, I went from that conversation, I went to an old-timey bookstore called Barnes & Noble, and probably used a credit card to buy the book, The Total Money Makeover. And I read it in 2 days flat, and that was it. We were in. I mean, we drank the Kool-Aid, and it was off to the races, and we didn't look back. And I worked an average of somewhere between 40 and 50 hours of overtime every month for 28 months.
Mhm.
We didn't go on vacation. We didn't eat out. We were remarkably disciplined, and in 2 days shy of 28 months, we paid off that 77, 282 and 33 cents. No, 232 and 88 cents. I always flop those up. And we became debt free with everything except for our house. We cut up our credit cards. We haven't had a credit card in 9 years. If we can't afford it, we don't buy it. That's it.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
And
It sounds really easy. It was
no,
not.
it's hard. It's hard. It's something my husband and I decided to be debt free as well many years ago, and because of that, I spoil us because I'm the one who manages money. But I spoil us, and we go business class overseas now. But we save for that, and that's like our treat to ourselves is doing that. But we've been married 19 years now, and so being debt free has really made a huge difference.
Absolutely.
But I love y'all's story about doing that. And Katie, I love the way that you started it. And it's a little bit of what Gottman is this couples guru guy. And he would call that kind of a soft startup. Hey, I'm worried about our finances.
Yeah.
It wasn't a you statement, right? It was about, hey, I'm worried about us.
Yeah, she's an evil genius.
Evil genius is a great word for it. That is amazing. So I love that. So high five for that one. Good job. So y'all had to buckle down for it was over 2 years that y'all buckled down to get this done, and the commitment. What kept y'all going through that time?
Honestly, Jason kept us going. It was so much harder.
I was going to say beer.
Oh, we actually did not drink.
No, we did not.
Alcohol.
Beer's
that was
expensive.
One of the things that we cut when we were.
Wasn't in the budget.
It wasn't.
Really
it wasn't
in the budget.
Yeah.
I got my $400, and that's all I got. So I was couponing, and it was exhausting. But Jason, every time he would sit down and do the budget, it was like, okay, we're sending this big payment off. That travel trailer, we actually paid it off and then sold it for the profit.
Yep.
And sent all of that to debt.
Mm-hmm.
And we did the same thing. I had a 2005 Acura that was my first brand new car, and it was cool, and I loved it. And we bought that as a shiny toy of, I can have a new car.
Yeah, I'm adulting. I'm adulting.
I even went on the car lot and was like, oh my God, that's exactly my car. And
at which point I went,
doing?
Oh dear God,
so
the salesman's right
they
here.
Marked it up when we stepped off the lot because we were. It was like whatever. It's how many hours of overtime, right?
Right.
Yeah.
What's the payment?
Let me put this in perspective real quick. Between our two cars, we were paying over $1,100 a month in car payments.
Yeah.
$1,100. And honestly, we're debt free, and I can't conceive of how we survived doing that.
With doing
That's
that,
everything else on credit cards.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah. So his discipline, and Jason is very goal oriented. He's very numbers minded. Still, he does his best self journal every morning and every night. And he's very, if you see it on paper and you say, I'm going to do that, he does that. I'm a little more flighty. I'm like,
that's a very polite way to say that.
Thank you. Thank you. But you have to have both sides of that,
Yeah.
And he was always very, no, we got this big payment. You got to keep it in perspective. I would cry sometimes, like actual tears. I would cry when we would send off this big payment, or we started tithing at our church. And I'm like, what is happening right now? God wants us to be out of debt. He wants us to keep this $800 for debt. I mean, what are we doing? But really, it was more of the heart change. And we both, even though we were in the journey together, we both very much had our own journey, our own way.
Your own internal processes.
Yes. Yeah. And it was, and it was a really cool experience to do that side by side, to understand that he understood that that was really hard for me to send off those big payments. But there is nothing better than calling up. I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it. Calling one of our credit card people and saying, no, I want to close the account. And still to this day, when I went shopping with a friend the other day and we were offered a credit card, as you always are, do you want to save 10% by opening? No, I like real money. I have the money to buy this. And I actually say that. No, I like real money instead. Are you sure you can, you can just pay it off every month? Oh, you're so cute.
Yeah, if I had $1 for every time I've heard somebody tell us, I have a credit card, but I pay it off every month. Really? Then how are there billions of dollars in debt associated with credit cards? It's just one guy going off the rails on a huge, cocaine binge in Vegas. I mean, come on. Yeah. That's not the case.
Yep. Totally. So yes, long period of time. I think about that is a long period of time to stick it out. Did y'all wind up having any struggles between the two of you during that time? Or was it really just like high five?
No, it was a lot of high fives.
It was a lot
honestly.
of high-fiving.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And that's the interesting part of this whole journey for us was, money fights. So for the law enforcement portion of our audience, when they go to DV calls, domestic violence calls, 9 times out of 10, that fight started over some kind of financial aspect. It happens all the time. So the key to this is being on the same page. That's what it takes. That heart shift, that mindset shift, and being on the same page, being vulnerable enough. Like she said, when she said, I'm worried about our finances, I could have blown her off. So she was vulnerable and I was willing to listen. And if you can't do that, you got bigger fish to fry, because that's an important aspect of marriage, regardless of what the hell you do for your profession. That's just being a good partner. And that's what we are. We are partners in every aspect of our marriage: financial, parental, spiritual, everything. And if you come at it from that point of view, you'll be way more successful than 95% of the marriages out there.
So I'm like, thank you, mic drop.
I can't. It's attached to an arm. I can't drop it.
You just validated everything I say in my podcast. You're exactly right. So the fact that y'all said this is a commitment we want to make to each other and to ourselves and to our family is really what held it together. It wasn't one person saying we have to do this and the other person going fine and doing it resentment. It was an agreement that the two of you had and decided to overcome this.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So, yes.
I want to know the story about Katie starting her business.
Okay. I love this story. So my sister is a big blogger, has been for many, many years. And I was this baby blogger for a while. I would write for the family and stuff. And she's like, hey, I have an opportunity to go to beaches in Turks and Caicos. And we were out of debt. And I'm like, hey, honey, I have this opportunity. Always a scary, scary word when it's talking about finances. I have this opportunity to go to this blogging conference with my sister. Can I go? He's like, yeah, babe, that sounds awesome. I will shift, adjust.
Didn't tell me where it was at the time.
No, I did, because he said, I'll shift, adjust. I'll take care of the kids. That sounds like a really, really cool thing for you. Oh, but I'm not going to pay for it. So he had
I think she might have said it's in.
well, he's not going to pay for me to go on this tropical vacation with my sister without him. He's like, I have been working my butt off so that we can be out of debt. We're both on the same page there. Why should you get to go drink Mai Tais and go to a blogging conference, right?
And she wasn't working out. She wasn't working outside the home at the time. So,
okay,
let me kind of put a pin in that real quick, because our big mindset shift came when we stopped using my money and her money.
Yeah,
it was our money.
Yeah.
And so I kind of reverted a little bit, because she said, I'd love to go to this conference in Turks and freaking Caicos. And I'm like, I am not paying for you to go to, like she said,
right,
even though it's our money.
Yeah.
But
no, and honestly, had we not had the awareness of our money, and had we not had that very connected understanding of what our plan was for our family, I would have been resentful about that. But instead, I'm like, I get it. I totally get it. So I put it on Facebook. Hey, does anybody need help? I don't know, sorting papers. Or I knew I didn't want to babysit. I didn't want to watch people's kids. I knew I didn't want to clean their house, because I do that at my house. I don't want to do that. That's not fun. And a friend of mine said, I could use some help in my little home office. And she took before and after pictures and posted them on Facebook. And I didn't know how much I was going to charge her. I didn't know how long it was going to take. I didn't really know what I was doing, but I just kind of I just went and just did my thing. I moved stuff around, and I helped people.
She Katie'd the bejesus out of it, is what she did.
I listen to the verb now. She
it's a thing. I assure you.
So, yeah, it is.
She admits it.
She has no choice.
It's okay. So she posted these pictures, and she was like, this was so amazing. Katie Hoschouer is fantastic. Thank you so much for transforming my space. 2 hours later, I had 2 more clients.
Wow.
And it just kept going. And I needed $1,500 to go on this vacation.
Okay.
I had made $1,500 plus some. And I remember sitting in the hot tub late one night in Turks and Caicos with that Mai Tai in my hand, all by myself. And I thought, okay, that was really fun. How I got here was really fun. Do I want to keep doing it? Because I had people on my books when I came home from my vacation. Wow. I made my goal. I did it. But at the same time, it was so amazing being out of the house, being able to be helpful. I mean, the name of my business, Katie Can Help, is so spot on, because I go in with this heart to help. And that's really very law enforcement-esque, right? They go in to serve. And that is it was very much a organic way of creating this calling, or of answering this call to do that. And had we not had the same mentality about our finances, I don't think I would have had that push to do that.
Yeah, it's almost like you wouldn't be where you are right now if you wouldn't have had that push.
Totally.
And I remember when we were getting out of debt, I told her, this is so funny. I told her, I can't tell you how much it would help if you could find a way, how much pressure it would take off of me as the sole breadwinner, again, air quotes on a radio show, sole breadwinner, if you could find a way to bring home $1,000 a month. That would be incredible. Last year, what did you end up making last year?
50 grand.
By herself, no employees, no nothing, just her. She grew it from a $1,500 goal to helping to support our family.
Wow.
It's ridiculous.
Which then I love that you're saying like, okay, and then that takes off the pressure for you.
Oh, huge.
Too. But it just grew organically. It was something that was part of your passion.
Yeah.
It's definitely a calling for her. I mean, she comes home after a client. Yeah, she's tired, but she just has this glint in her eye. And if you get her started talking about it, so I'll give you a word of warning. She will not shut up. It's great. It's great. I love
That might be a whole nother show,
it.
Katie.
It totally is.
Oh yeah.
we could talk about how do we organize our lives, and you could come on and we'll talk about that later. So I know, Jason, there's also a part of this journey for you is that you wanted to find another way to have a stream of income, that you weren't out on the street, which really inspired a whole different, I don't know, part of your life. And, you know, one of the things that I look at is that a lot of officers make that their whole life, as opposed to having I hate to use the word balance. I call dimension. I say dimension. So different dimensions in our life, whether that's our role as a spouse, our role as a daughter, our role as a parent, but you created this other dimension too. Katie created dimension in starting a business, and you did too. So what was the inspiration for doing that?
You know, as a police officer, I live to serve, right? It's on the side of most police cars, protect and serve. And when I am, pardon me, when I'm teaching, I talk about that, especially when I teach at the academy. Everybody loves to protect. Everybody wants to kick in doors, take bad guys to prison. I get it. Great. But 95% of our job is sitting at a Starbucks and somebody walks up and asks us a damn question. And you're like, I just want my friggin' latte. Leave me alone. Right? But it's right there. You have to serve. And if you have a problem with being a servant, if you have a negative connotation of that term, you're going to be a terrible insert thing here. Cop, firefighter, medic, whatever. You have to be able to serve. And I got such a charge out of getting out of debt. I thought, Dave Ramsey's amazing, but he's not a cop. And cops don't trust anybody but other cops.
No.
It's a thing. So I thought, well, how can I take his message and gear it towards initially just police officers? And it's kind of expanded into on our podcast, What's Your Emergency? We call them the 3 disciplines because my partner hates first responders for whatever stupid reason. God bless him. So anybody in the 3 disciplines, right? And I thought, you know, this message needs to get out there because of this overtime cycle, because of, honest to God, it started after 15 years on the job, and I'm getting close to 21. So 6 years ago when I read Gil Martin's book, I finished the book, literally put it down and looked at Katie and said, this is why I'm such an asshole sometimes. Yeah. And I had her read it.
I'm so glad.
And then we got to see him speak live. So it was the combination of getting out of debt and all of that nonsense and reading Gil Martin's book and thinking, you know, when I would come home and she would say, what do you want for dinner? I don't care. I literally could not care if I tried. And there is a physiological, neurological reason for that. And I understood that. And after she read it, she understood that. So she stopped asking me that question.
Such an eye-opener. Yeah, it's such an eye-opener.
It's huge. Yeah. So I thought, you know, if I can have this moment of clarity or an epiphany, maybe I can speak into the lives of other cops and they'll listen to me because I've walked in their shoes, especially baby cops, be it, you know, a rookie or a recruit in the academy. If I can look back on my career and say, hey, there's some potholes, look out for those. Don't step in those. Don't be an idiot. I mean, they told me before I started the academy, don't make huge purchases. You may not make it through the academy. Don't buy a house. Don't buy a car. Well, all I had was a motorcycle. So I thought, well, I have to buy a car. I didn't buy a used car. I bought a brand new car. And it was stupid. Thank God I made it through the academy. But it was a remarkably irresponsible financial decision. Yeah. And if I can speak into the lives of other cops, firefighters, medics, whatever, and I can tell them, hey, I know how it feels to be you. I know how it feels to work 80 hours of overtime in a month and miss my family and have all of these inclinations for feeling better through retail therapy. I understand that. It's dumb. Don't do it. Here's how to make your way through it. So that's why I created the business that I had that is since changed kind of branding a bit. Now it's the Motor Cop Mindset. And I wrote a book called Badges and Budgets about our story. I created an online course that teaches people how to budget Dave is great at the big picture.
Mm-hmm.
I can take your experience and teach you how to create a budget based on your numbers. That's how and I'm actually going to be revamping the course and improving it because I wrote it a number of years ago. And since then, I become a post-certified master instructor for the state of California. So I have a little bit different perspective about teaching now than I did then. But it was because of Katie and my Aunt Valerie. She lives in Santa Cruz, and a beautiful area, and said, I'm going to leave my house for a weekend. You're welcome to come. And Katie said, go for it. And I wrote that book. It's like 12 or 13,000 words. I wrote it over a 2-day period. I just sat down and went through it.
And the book is really interesting. I encourage everybody to go to Jason's website, which is themotorcopmindset.com. And he makes that available. He makes it available. I can't talk. He makes the book available to you. You just need to put in your email address to get the book. And I wound up reading the book on a flight to Odessa. So in a 1-hour flight, I finished the book. Now I'm a quick read, and there were some things in there that I already knew. And one of the tools that he talks about, not just the Dave Ramsey, but also a program out there called You Need a Budget, which is also what we use. And so those tools are available, and I'm so glad that he's revamping everything and going to be able to use that to access for all of you. So thank you so much, Katie and Jason, for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate it. All of your stories and the struggle that you went through is just so inspiring as far as helping people to overcome that overtime cycle and then to stay out of debt and keep moving forward. I think it's just amazing. If you want to get a hold of Jason, you can email him at jason@themotorcopmindset, or literally just Google Motor Cop because he's the first one that comes up on Google. And if you need some help with maybe organizing, contact Katie. Katie is at katiecanhelp.com, and she's in the San Francisco area. Man, if she was closer, I would be having her come to my house. So thank you so much for joining me today. Until next time, keep it code 4.